Om Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyau Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantif Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantif Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantif Shantireva Shanti Shantir Me Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra Sukhina Santu, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukha Bhag Bhavet, Sarvastaratu Durgani, Sarvo Bhadrani Pashyatu, Sarvas Sadbuddhimapnotu, Sarvas Sarvatra Nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. We were studying verse number 12 last time when we concluded. So let's read it again, because there are a few things that need to be discussed in that one. So let's read verse 12 again. Kangshantav karmanam siddhim yajanta iha devataha kshipram hi manushe loke siddhir bhavati karmaja. People seeking the fruit of actions worship the gods in this world, for in this world of man the fruit of action comes quickly. The question that we addressed last time was that when God is capable of giving us so much, that why do we then go to God with small things, with petty things? In fact, we ask for very little without realizing that much more can be got from the divine. And in that context, we remember the story that Sri Ramakrishna used to say, how a person goes to a king and the king says, ask whatever you want, and he just asks for 2 pounds of eggplant. So that's the story Ramakrishna often mentioned. But why is it that even people who are religious, people who see themselves as spiritual seekers, are not really seeking the spirit? I mean, come to think about spiritual seeker, if you take it literally, means one who seeks the spirit. But are we really seeking the spirit, or are we seeking something else? And I think most people, even religious people, if you ask them, what are you really seeking? I'm skeptical about how many people say, I'm seeking the spirit. I think what most people might say, I'm just seeking peace of mind. That would be one common answer. I just want to be happy. I want to be free from my troubles. I would like to get some of the things which I don't have now. And so there are any number of reasons because of which people turn to spirituality. And those are good reasons, because oftentimes it is seen that people can get through prayer, through good actions, through following the right path, many of the desires do get fulfilled. And that is why it is said, the second, in this world of men, the fruit of action comes quickly. Clearly, the joy that you will get after eating, say, chocolate ice cream is quite instantaneous. You don't have to say, I will get the joy after I die when I go to heaven. No, it's immediate. On the other hand, the joy of being a Jivan Mukta, the joy of being enlightened like the Buddha is kind of nice, but it doesn't seem like it will be as quickly as a chocolate ice cream. Oh, that's obvious. Also, we feel that getting a chocolate ice cream, I keep on saying chocolate ice cream, but really you can substitute it by anything you like. But it seems much more easier and within our grasp or capacity than enlightenment. We would kind of, at the back of the mind, like to be enlightened, but it still seems to be a very distant goal. It doesn't seem a very realistic goal. I remember when I was studying in 8th grade back in India, in a Hindi text, we had one lesson, the extract from a larger passage. The essay was titled, in Hindi, it was titled Marna Ek Kala Ek Chance. Literally translated means that was an essay on death. Death, an art, and a chance. Now, I won't go into the details of that, although it was a really fascinating essay. But one of the statements in that essay was that don't you think that that person is more practical who makes the plan to pluck mangoes from a tree than to pluck stars from the heavens? And we might say, well, I think it's more practical because it is something within my capacity to go up a tree and get mangoes, rather than say, oh, I'm going to pluck the stars, because it just seems so much out of reach. And therefore, seeking things in this world, the little desires that we have, seems quicker and seems more manageable than this goal of becoming the infinite, becoming immortal. And what Vedanta and the Gita in particular wants to impress on our mind is that that highest goal may not be as out of reach as we think. One of the obstacles in spiritual life is to think that that goal is far off. So think about it this way. When you sit for your prayer, when you sit for your meditation, and at the back of the mind is the idea, well, I'm doing something good, but enlightenment is far off. I think that's an obstacle. It is also an indication that our faith in the ever-present reality of the divine hasn't been strong yet. If we truly believe in God's grace, if we truly believe that the Spirit is all-pervading, then every time I sit to pray or to meditate, the divine is there, right near me. In fact, not just near me, right? The divine is everywhere. It's within me and outside me. In the Quran, in Islamic text, there is a statement that God is nearer to you than your jugular vein. It's supposed to be that vein which is, if you just cut it open, a person dies. So anyway, the idea is that the divine, there can be nothing closer to me than God. If that's true, then isn't it ironical that someone or something which is closest to me seems farthest away from me? Seems to be something that, oh my God, it's going to take years and years and years to reach someone who is closest to me than anything else. And so the first thing that we need to remember and keep on remembering every time we forget it is that enlightenment is not a distant goal. Enlightenment is not something you all necessarily have to keep on practicing for years and years. You may have to. You need patience, you need perseverance, but don't automatically assume that it's going to take a long time. You should be ready at any moment. God's grace can come any moment. God is, as I sometimes say, not going to send you an email and saying, okay, next week I'm coming, get ready. It's not going to happen. Grace can come any moment, and therefore we have to be vigilant, we have to be alert every moment. And oftentimes we will see that grace comes in our lives in many unexpected ways, at most unexpected times and in a very unexpected manner. That's the difficulty. And sometimes grace may come and we may not even recognize it. That is why once someone went to Holy Mother Sharda Devi and said, Mother, and as oftentimes as devotees we do, Mother, please shower your grace on me. And once Mother said, she said, people keep saying, grace, grace. And she said, grace is not like some kind of a nice little breeze that occasionally comes and you feel good. She said, no, the grace is always present. But if we are not ready for it, if we are not expecting it, then we will miss it. Grace may come and we won't even know it's there. Grace may knock at our door and we may not even hear the knock because we think, oh, grace is going to come after 20 years or 30 years or after a long time. And therefore, constant vigilance. And so we may, obviously, we don't meditate all 24 hours, but even if we meditate a few minutes in the morning, a few minutes in the evening, that does not give us a license then to say, okay, my morning prayer is over, I don't have to worry about it till the evening, and then I can then get on with the rest of my life. Actually, no. If we are serious about spiritual life, then there is really no holiday in spiritual life. Sure, the systematic, methodical practice of prayer or meditation may be a while in the morning, a little while in the evening. But that does not mean that once my prayer or meditation finishes, I can then forget about it and do something else. A part of our mind must always be kind of engaged with this. It's like in computers. Sometimes you are, say, downloading a very big file. The downloading can keep on going, and then you can be busy doing other things, but the downloading still is going on in the background. Exactly in the same way, a part of our mind can be kept with God. And we might say, well, I would like to give my full mind to the work that I do. I think that's a great idea. If we can give a full mind to the work, then you're excused from putting that little bit of mind to God. But if you're not going to put our entire mind in any work anyway, a part of it is going to get distracted by 100 other things, then I think it's not a big deal if it can get distracted a little bit by God. So that's the idea. So sometimes people give a thing like, how can I be thinking about God all the time because I have other things to do? I understand that argument, but my point is, even when I have other things to do, my whole mind is not thinking about that other thing. My mind is thinking about 100 other things at the same time. Then it's not very unreasonable to say, well, then at least a part of the mind can be thinking about God. And the example that I sometimes like to give is of the experience we have of the toothache. If you have a toothache, and oftentimes your dentist may not be cooperative enough to give you an appointment right away. The dentist might say, come after 2 days, or come after next week. What are you going to do? Well, you can't be, you have to live with the toothache until you meet your doctor. And then till that time, you go about doing your duty, carrying out your other stuff, all the time aware of the toothache. So a part of your mind is aware of the toothache, and yet you are able to go about doing your day-to-day actions. If that is possible, then it should not be impossible that a part of my mind is aware of my spiritual ideal, and yet I'm able to keep on doing my other thing. Rather than being a distraction, the thought of the divine is such a powerful, such a benign influence that a little bit of my mind is at the feet of the Lord. The quality of my work that I do with the rest of the mind will improve. So being distracted by God is very different from being distracted by anything else. So this is important to remember, that people seek ordinary things in this world rather than enlightenment is because of our idea that these things are easy, they are quicker, and enlightenment is huge and is time consuming or is going to take a long time. So we must disabuse ourselves of that idea. Verse 13. Chaturvarnyam maya srishtam guna karma vibhagashaha tasya kartaram mam vidya kartaram avyayam. The four castes were created by me according to differences in aptitudes and actions, though the author of them know me, the immutable, as non-agent. And this is a verse that gets often quoted and is seen as a way of how castes are actually sanctioned by the Gita itself. So I would like to say something, dwell on it a little bit more than I would have otherwise done. Although the word in English translation here is translated as caste, the word in Sanskrit itself is varna. There are two terms in Sanskrit, varna and jati, and both get translated into English as caste. And in scholarly circles, there is a lot of debate whether varna and jati are same or different, or what's the difference. So I'm not going to go into all those technicalities, although that's an interesting discussion in itself, though I'm not sure how practically useful it is. What's important to remember here is this, that when it is said that I created these four varna, these are basically divisions for four categories in society. Now we might say, why four? It's undeniable that there is diversity. In any social structure, anywhere, there is always diversity. And that's just the way the world is. No two things or no two people are exactly identical. So, while diversity is the reality which we encounter, but why four? And the reason four is because of the worldview that is presented here, the conceptual framework that is presented in the Gita and in Vedanta speaks about three gunas, the three primary attributes of all material entities. And popularly they are called sattva, rajas, and tamas. Rajas is the principle of activity, tamas is the principle of inertia, and sattva is the principle of light, the balance, the harmony of these two. So because of that conceptual framework, that there are these three basic attributes of material entities, and that based on them, the enormous diversity that exists in society is broadly classified into four groups. And of course, many of you are familiar with the names. In Sanskrit, they are called Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. So the Brahmanas are those, the first category is of those whose predominant characteristic, just filled with sattva. So those who are filled with that sattva quality are the first category. The second category are those whose predominant nature is filled with sattva and rajas. They are called Kshatriyas. The third category is called Vaishyas. Those comprising those people whose predominant characteristics are rajas and tamas. So sattva kind of is, as you can see, becoming progressively less. The first category was just filled with sattva. The second one was sattva mixed with rajas. By the time you come to third, it is rajas mixed with tamas. And a fourth category of people just filled with tamas. Now, these are the four broad categories into which human beings can be divided. And so Krishna says, they were created by me, according to the differences in aptitude and action, guna, karma. So you see, guna is the three gunas that I mentioned. And action, karma. So the differences in the guna reflect in the differences in the kind of work the different people can do. And we can see that very clearly also, that even, say, siblings in the same family, although apparently everything else will be identical, their parents are identical, maybe they go to the same school, they had the same set of teachers, they grew up in the same neighborhood, and yet they turn out to be so different from one another. Maybe one has interest in art, the other one likes to go and work in the garden, or someone likes to maybe go and study. So what makes these differences, even for those who are in the same family? So we cannot always explain it through heredity, because the parents may be same. You cannot explain it through environment, because siblings can grow up in the same environment with the same companions, and yet they turn out to be so different. So there is something intrinsically different within a human makeup, and that intrinsic difference is the gunas, the sattva, rajas, tamas. And because of the different combination of these gunas, and in addition, karma means our past impression, the work that we have done earlier, and the impressions that we have in our mind, and the different interests that we have developed. So depending on our interests and depending on our aptitude, we are naturally attracted to certain kinds of work. So what Krishna is saying here is, the diversity that you see in society is created by me. And you say, well, of course, but not just the diversity, everything is created by the divine. So that's not a big surprise that he created that. Look at the last sentence. Though the author of them, though I created them, know me the immutable as non-agent. So there are two things here. Everything in the world is created by God. And our normal way of thinking is that, well, if you create it, then you are responsible for it. And that is why sometimes we ask questions like, why is all this evil? And why did God allow it? Because God did everything, and so evil and all the terrible things happening, well, God is responsible because God made it. And of course, so Krishna is pointing out that although I made it, I'm not responsible because I'm a non-agent. Now, a lot of these questions come just because of the way we think about God. Oftentimes it's okay when we are little children to think of, oh, God created us, and we think about God as some person sitting somewhere, and God created us. So that's okay. But when we grow up, we need to start asking questions. And if we don't ask those questions, then we might grow up. We may not be children, and yet we might still think like children. Because if we begin to start questioning the idea of God that we had as little children, it becomes increasingly untenable to think of God as some person sitting up somewhere high above the clouds in some place called heaven or wherever. It really raises too many questions with no answers. In fact, the more you think about it, the more silly it looks. And so therefore we need to then refine our understanding of what does it mean that God created us. So the idea of God is an extra cosmic entity apart from me sitting there. And then of course, if that were the God that we worship, then we have every right to say, well, you created the mess, you come and solve it. And the people who believe in that kind of God have to figure out how to deal with that conundrum. The the divine that the Gita teaches here is not the divine who is some person who one fine morning got up and made this one and said, now you are on your own. The divine here is seen as the reality within our own heart. So I think I'm probably kind of going ahead of myself, so I really don't want to, it's not like some mystery novel that I have to keep something for the afterwards. But I think let's just, for the time being, let me just put it very briefly this way. Each of us is a kind of creator also. And, well, we create our dream world. Who is the creator of the dream that you see at night? Well, you are the one who created. And you are the one who destroyed when you wake up in the morning. And so each of us is a kind of a creator also. But let's not make it too complicated right now. So here, the divisions that we see in society. Now, Krishna says that these divisions exist based on the differences in guna and karma. Now, how did this whole idea of jati, or a popular idea of caste, come into being? It's not too complicated, really. Try to think about how society may have existed centuries ago. This text, through conservative estimates, is at least 2,000 or 3,000 years old. So think about the society of those days. We know very little apart from whatever texts are available or myths are available. But at least there are some things we can be sure of. Clearly, in those days, there were no schools to go to, the kind of professional schools that we have. In those days, there was no jet travel. So people pretty much, even before the wheel was invented, there wasn't even any a bullock cart maybe to go to, or a horse carriage. So, I mean, how much can you go? What distance would you go just walking? And why would you want to go anywhere? So pretty much every settlement on this, and let's not think about the whole cosmos, just too big. Let's just think about this, our little planet Earth. So every settlement, people pretty much grew up in some place. They were born there, they were raised there, they grew up, then they started families there, then they had children, they had grandchildren, and they died there. Even now, there are always a few people. And I know a few people, even in New England area, who have not gone out of New England, not gone out of Massachusetts for that matter. Although such number would be very small now, because the traveling has become easy. But in those early days, every community had to be more or less self-sufficient. There wasn't easy transfer of populations in those days. In other words, say in a village, there are some things that every community needs. You need, you need some learned person to help you with whatever form of religion they practiced. You needed some kind of strong people to defend the community against dangers from wild animals or whatever. You needed some form of trade, people who could, whether it was a barter system or whichever, there were some people who would help provide resources to the community for their daily use, for their family use, and so on. And then you needed people to go and work. You needed carpenters, you needed blacksmiths, you needed physicians, because people fall sick. So you needed all these things, but there were no schools to go to. So whatever skills had come to these people, the easiest way to then, when people got old, was then to transfer it to their children. So it was much easier then for a carpenter's son to learn carpentry because, again, that's something you saw, you helped your dad or mom do it from childhood, and you picked up the way of doing it. That is how many of these trades became hereditary, because there was no other option. Not only that, there was no freedom. In other words, let's say several centuries ago, my dad is a village physician, and I have no interest in medicine at all. I love to do painting, and my dad wants to teach me about this thing, and I say, no, I'm not interested. I'm just going to go out into the field and paint. And so that time the community said, sorry, you can't do it. Your dad is a physician, you have got to learn it, because we can't go one generation without a physician in this village. We need somebody. Similarly, a carpenter's son had to be a carpenter. A gardener's son had to be a gardener, because there was no option. The community did not give freedom to the people to choose the trade they wanted, because of just a social need. And we might say, and again, from a 21st century sensibility, we might say, that's terrible. People have no freedom. And we have that debate even today. The whole thing about, for instance, privacy, personal privacy, as opposed to how much can the state and can look into your emails, and terrorism. So there is a fear, and there is the personal privacy and freedom. So we have this debate even today, and it's always will remain. And at some point we all realize that while personal liberty is a great idea, one can go and live in a desert, not connected with any social structure, and practice all the liberty you want. But if I'm going to live in the heart of a city, then I will have to put a limit. I'll have to let go a little bit of my freedom, because in return for the things that I get for being part of a larger community. For instance, everyone would say, I just want to go at any speed I want. Why should I follow all the traffic rules? And then you say, no, well, you go into a desert and drive whichever way you want. No one's going to stop you. So my personal liberty will have to be curtailed if I have to get certain privileges and advantages of being part of a larger community. So that's what the thinking was. That sure, if you want to be a part of this community, then you have got to do this trade. You have no choice. Now, there were a few people who said, I don't want to be a part of this community. I just want to give myself to thinking about God. And those are the people who became monks, who became sannyasins. And they just went to the Himalayas. They just went to the forests. And because they were not part of any community, the community said, then you are excused. You don't have to follow all the rules. We will not impose any restriction on you, because you are not receiving any of the benefits or privileges being a part of a community. So that was the deal. And which is how these castes became hereditary. Now, over time, over centuries then, that's how it became. And then people who were following certain trades became known. So although popularly we speak about these four as castes, actually if you go to any Indian society, there are not just four. Nobody just says, I'm a Kshatriya. Although people might say that, there are so many sub-castes and sub-denominations. And oftentimes all of them will finally be connected with some trade. So that is how the society in Indian subcontinent grew and developed. And although a caste, as it is understood, is often seen as a part of the religion that grew there, the reality is that it's part of the society. It's a social institution, not a religious institution. Also, which is not to say that only the society in the Indian subcontinent had these divisions, and societies in other parts of the world were all monolithic. There wasn't division, which is not true.
There are divisions in every society, but the basis of those divisions are different. The basis could be just color. Basis could be your economic status. It could be anything. What one person said rather simplistically, said what is caste in India is class in England and race in the United States. Now again, this is a simplistic statement, but what it does mean is that no matter where we are, it's somehow part of the human DNA that wherever we may be, we will make subgroups within a larger group. Even the big socialist, communist ideal of a classless society was never really truly classless. There was division even there. You just cannot get rid of it. So all this has to be kept in mind. And because caste is a social structure, as society changes, the structure will have to be changed. You can't be stuck in one structural model when the society itself has changed. And we know society is an ever-changing society. There are things have changed, not only in India, everywhere in the world. The way societies were 1,000 years ago or 500 years ago now is changing, which is why we need a different sets of social laws. Social laws also have to evolve according to the changes in society. And we said that we see that that's happening everywhere. It's happening here, for instance, in the Western world, and slowly in the Eastern world as well. For instance, the question about same-sex marriage. Now that was a new social structure that has come, an ideal that has come, and a society has to make way for it, find way for it. There is resistance, there is acceptance. So you have this kind of a tug of war. When anything new comes up, reaches a tipping point, for instance, and a society then has to find, well, what do we do with this? And there'll be always some people who will be resisting it and some people who will be welcoming it. And it's this kind of a tension with new changes occurring, and a society has to grapple with it and make peace with it. And that is why this Chatur Varnya, the four castes, I often find that the discussion about castes in Hinduism or in Indian society often gets stuck up with some 2,000-year-old society, and then people kind of apply it rather recklessly to 21st century society, which has changed so much. And that is why Swami Vivekananda said that when societies change, a great social lawgivers must arise and codify the laws suitable for that time, for that society. Now these laws were sometimes called in India, called smritis. So one big name in the Indian society was Manu, called Manusmriti. And people still kind of hold that as if it's the Vedas, but it is not. It is not the Vedas. It was Manu was a great person who set down or codified laws meant for the society of those days. But several other smritis have come. There is one Yajnavalkya Smriti and so on. And Swami Vivekananda encouraged and said, we must now have a new smriti, a new codification of social laws for the present day society. Again, it won't be same for societies all over the world. It never will be, because societies are different. So it's not something that has to be followed everywhere in the world, but it will be these distinct communities that inhabit different parts of the planet will have to remain up to date with the changes occurring in society, with the needs and aspirations of its people, and find ways through which everyone can live in not only in peace and harmony, but everyone will be able to manifest their potential fully. And those societies which are able to do it well, those societies thrive. Those places where it's not done well or it's done clumsily, that's where we see a lot of unrest. And seeing that there is pretty much unrest pretty much everywhere in the world, we have got to admit we're not really doing a good job. So that's how it is. So keep this in mind, because this verse will often be quoted to show, oh, the Gita says the four castes were created by Krishna, but there is a lot to think about it when you come here. So verse number 14. Namam karmani limpanti name karma phale spruha itimam yobhijanati karma bhirna sabadhyate. Actions do not touch me, nor have I any desire for their fruit. He who knows me thus is not bound by actions. Now remember, Krishna is giving this teaching to Arjuna on the battlefield. It's not that, oh, let me give you a big lecture on how societies are formed. The reason he mentions that is to show that people are different. And because people are different, they seek different things. And all these things really has come from the divine. And he says, I'm a non-agent because I'm non-attached. And this is the idea he elaborates in this verse. Actions do not touch me, nor have I any desire for their fruit. He who knows me thus is not bound by actions. Again, you remember what I told you about whenever Krishna says me or I, he is referring to the Atman. So now just substitute. Wherever me is there, substitute by the word Atman. Actions do not touch the Atman, nor has the Atman any desire for its fruits. He who knows the Atman thus is not bound by actions. What Krishna is saying here is not simply that Krishna is not bound by those actions and that we are automatically bound by them. What Krishna is saying is, you too don't have to be bound by your actions. If you remember that you are the Atman, then the Atman is not affected by any of this. Remember, Arjuna's problem was, what shall I do? Should I fight or not fight? And Krishna is reminding him, first of all, you are the Atman. So when you fight, whether there is victory or defeat, that's not your victory or defeat. If you remember you are the Atman. In other words, think about it this way. When are we affected by our actions? And we are affected by our actions when we are identified with our body and mind. And when we are not identified with the body and mind, the body and mind may have its problem. I'm not affected by it. And this is something, it's not too difficult to understand. You can see that, for instance, if you have say a shoulder pain for some reason, someday, and of course when you have a shoulder pain and it's time to sleep, it's not easy to get sleep because you have pain. And so there might be difficulty in getting sleep. But let's say that you're so exhausted that you fall asleep anyway. I mean, it's not that if you have pain you never sleep. Sometimes just mere exhaustion will make us fall asleep in spite of the pain. Now, once you fall asleep, the problem is not really solved. Whatever is causing pain in the shoulder, that problem still exists. But you don't feel the pain as long as you're asleep. And then when you wake up, and then of course the pain is there. Now what has made the difference? Nothing has changed. Maybe you didn't even take any medication. Whatever disorder was there, that is still there. But when you were asleep, you didn't feel the pain. When you woke up, you felt the pain. So before sleep, there was pain. During sleep, there was no pain. After waking up, there was pain again. So something happened during that sleep. And the only thing that happened during the sleep was that you were disidentified with the body. The body didn't disappear, but you didn't have the ego, oh, this is me and it's my shoulder, it's paining. That ego connected with the body temporarily switched off. But that's what sleep means. As long as it's like this. When you're lying in your bed, as long as you know who you are and where you are, and the idea, well, I'm lying in my bed, you're not asleep. And what does sleep mean? Suddenly you forget. Suddenly you don't know who you are. Suddenly you don't know that you are in your bed. So once that disidentification occurs, that's what sleep means. The problem of the body remains with the body. You are free until you wake up. And then again you get this identity with the body and it comes. Same thing with the mind. Let's say you have some lot of anxiety about something, or you're worried about something, or you're afraid about something. Again, you might have difficulty falling asleep, but let's say you fall asleep anyway. Now, as long as you're asleep, that worry, that anxiety, that fear will not bother you. There may be some different worry and anxiety in your dream, but not the worry that you had before. Also, if there is any fear or worry or anxiety in the dream, that fear or worry or anxiety will disappear when you wake up. But the old worry and anxiety, that will come back. Again, you became disidentified with it. Now, it's simple that in a very natural way, when I become disidentified with my body and mind, the problems connected with my body and mind don't disappear, but they don't affect me. So the body is there, the mind is there, but I am not identified with it, so I'm in bliss. In deep sleep, you're not connected with the body and mind, and you are in bliss. Now, the deep sleep cannot be artificially generated. It happens in a natural way, and it's good. Everybody has this every night or whenever we sleep. Within a 24-hour cycle, there's at least a few minutes when we are not even dreaming. That's called sushupti, the dreamless sleep. And really, that's the only time we have really good rest. Because even if you sleep for long hours and most of the time you are dreaming, you don't feel too rested when you wake up in the morning because the mind is still jumping. So whatever little bit of sanity is left in us is also because of that few minutes when we just almost switch off. Not totally, because otherwise we would be dead, but almost. Now the whole idea about Vedanta is that those few minutes when we are able to disidentify with the body and mind and experience this complete freedom and joy, and really nothing restricts us in deep sleep. We don't feel limited by the body, mind, space, time, nothing. You are really infinite. You are immortal in your deep sleep. All that disappears when we wake up, and again we become like mortal, weak, worried, hopeless creatures. So the whole idea about the Gita teaching is that, can I recreate that deep sleep experience in a conscious way? Because deep sleep, we are not really conscious. It's something that just happens. Now, can I recreate that in a conscious way by which I will have that experience not only when I am fast asleep, but when I wake up, when I go about my day-to-day activities, when I spend time with my family, with my friends, at my workplace. Everything happens, and deep inside, I know that I'm not the body, I'm not the mind. If we can do that, he who knows me thus, means if I can do that, that person is not bound by action. You are not just action, you're not bound by anything in life. You will be free this moment. So freedom is not something that comes by going to some place called heaven, The freedom can come right now, right here. And it's actually, to put it in words is the simplest thing. Really, just to know, I am not this. I am not the mind. I am the infinite spirit. We can begin by at least reflecting on this intellectually, at least thinking about it. And as far as possible, try to build our lives according to it. If I can think, speak, do actions with always this thought somewhere at the back of the mind, I am the spirit, I am the infinite one. I think it's worth trying. It's worth trying, even if you're able to hold that thought even for 30 seconds. And then maybe again you kind of get consumed in action, you just forget you are the spirit. But again, maybe after 5 minutes you remember, oh, I'm the Atman, which is fine. So no matter how often you forget it, try to remind yourself. Again, if the Atman or the spirit idea seems too abstract, and if you are temperamentally more theistic in nature, I think it's fine. It's fine to say, I'm a child of God, which is wonderful. I'm a devotee of God. So any kind of an ego which is either associated with the divine in a theistic manner, being a child of God or a devotee of God, or in a non-theistic way, I'm the spirit, I'm not the body and mind. Whichever way works for you. And again, people are different. So one way will not work for everybody. But whichever way works, try to do it. And sometimes you will see, in the beginning, it could be exhausting because not many of us have thought about it for any length of time. But it's worth giving it a try. And if you enjoy it, then you will feel like doing it more. What it also does is we really don't then need to, it helps us actually. For those serious spiritual seekers, it helps us remain on the right path. Because whenever there is any doubt or question, should I say this? Should I do this? But because I'm trying to remember, I'm a child of God or I'm the spirit, it's not then too difficult to make a connection. Would a child of God behave this way? Would a child of God speak this way? Is this what an Atman would do? Would the Atman go and shout at someone? Something like that. So it does help. It does help. So, and it's not something very difficult. It's not like, say, lift some 200 pounds weight or something, which many of us may not be able to do. So this is something all of us can try. And that is the message here. Actions do not touch me, nor have I any desire for their fruit. He who knows me thus is not bound by actions. So let me do the right thing. If I desire the fruit, I'm not really being the Atman. I'm just kind of forgetting I'm the Atman because the Atman lacks nothing. And a desire is a admission of the fact that I lack something, because we desire only what we lack, only what we don't have. And if I'm the infinite one, if I'm the spirit, then I don't lack anything. So every time I desire something, I'm kind of forgotten that I'm the infinite one. And so we spoke last time about how if we can shorten the list of the things that we want, if we can shorten or if we can minimize our desires, to that extent we will begin to expect freedom. So don't think that the switch is simply that, oh, I'm now bound and then in a minute I'll be free. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way. We can begin to experience the joys of freedom in a progressive way. And one very easy way to even begin experiencing that joy in our heart right away is to try to minimize our needs. Try as far as possible to be as simple. And by simple, I don't mean just kind of an external simplicity. That's not the point. The point is, how can I be simple in the way I think? our lives have become complicated to a large extent because of our complicated way of thinking. So there is a saying in India when I was growing up, the pranayama, for instance, this control of breath. Oftentimes people kind of hold it this way, and there is one way of kind of regulating breath in this thing. But what if someone says, let me now try to control breath this way? I mean, your hand itself may not reach your nostril, but so that's basically what's happening in our lives, that there is certain thing that needs to be accomplished, and there is a simple way to do it, and there is a complicated way to do it. And believe it or not, most people choose the complicated way. Why would they choose a complicated way? Because that's the only way they see. We haven't become simple ourselves, so the simple way eludes us. One joke that is sometimes told, and it's just a joke, was that apparently it seems that when the space exploration started, one of the challenges they had was that the astronauts could not use a pen. The ink pen got all frozen. There was no gravity. They just couldn't use it. And so apparently, the story goes like this. Apparently, NASA then commissioned a big study. But what shall we do? How can we write? And they spent several millions of dollars and finally found the ballpoint pen, which could use, which wouldn't use the ink pen, but a kind of pen which can be used. And then apparently discovered that the Soviet Union, which existed at that time, this is not a historical story, as I said. Apparently they said, well, we solved the problem long ago. We just use a pencil. Now, of course, this is simply anecdotal, but the idea was this, that if there is an easy solution ahead of us, in front of us, we may not notice it if we haven't become simple ourselves. And to the extent we become simple in a way we think, way we understand ourselves, we understand the world, we will begin to see that there is not only an easier way to do things, but a simpler way to do things. And a simpler way is always the best way. So let's stop being complicated people and begin more simple. That is why it is sometimes said, it is simple to be happy, but difficult to be simple. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. We bow down to Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother again and again. I forgot to ask you whether you had any comments or questions. We don't have much time, but is there anything you need to ask? Yes?
Pretty quickly, you mentioned, that part of being, Atman, that itself is a pretty difficult task, even if you want to do it. But being in this society and living, that becomes even more challenging when you try to think of that you are not the body, you are the Atman, but the people around you are saying, no, you are the body, because you
Sure.
So that even becomes more challenging.
Well, they can think what they want. Why should that affect you? It's like this. For instance, there may be a lot of people who think I am a fool. But I am who I am, right? So what people think of me doesn't change me. I mean, they may be right, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I become a fool just because people think I'm a fool. So, yeah, sure, other people are going to look upon you as just a human being, and that doesn't, it's a little larger problem, and the problem is this, that do I want other people to define who I am? You see, it's like we don't want somebody else to say, this is your worth. We say, no, everybody thinks, my worth is much more than that. So we all believe that I know myself more than anybody else does, right? So you have the freedom to think of yourself as the Atman, even if nobody around you does. Having said that, if there are people around you who also treat you like the Atman, then it becomes easier for you to think of yourself as the Atman. It's not so easy when everybody's treating you like, because we absorb all these influences from outside. And which is why, therefore, being part of a spiritual community is very helpful. And that's why, for instance, now, those of us who come here for the Gita class, those of us who are part of this Vedanta community. Now, if these ideas make sense, that in reality, there is this divine being within our heart, that we are not just the body-mind complexes, that there is a deeper truth within us. Now, within this small circle, can we not only look upon ourselves as the Atman, we say, but everybody here, when I speak with them, when I talk with them, I will see that they are divine also. Now, if I look upon another person, another fellow Vedanta student as a divine being, I'm actually helping that person, because then it becomes easier for that person to think I'm divine. Similarly, if somebody looks upon you as an Atman, it becomes easier for you to think you're the Atman. Now, we don't have control over the big world about how others are going to look at you. But within this small circle, it becomes then much more easier. And that's why being part of a community helps. When we each have our own ideas, not that we all think exactly in the same way, but there is also a common ideal. There is something in common that we are all able to appreciate, or able to learn from, or able to be inspired by. Then within such a smaller group, we can then support each other, help each other, by looking upon everyone, respecting everyone as a divine. So when you say namaste, or when you folded hands, you are really acknowledging that the person in front of you is divine. Now, if we have that, and of course, none of us is, other than me, no one is staying here 24 hours a day, but within that, whatever time you visit the Vedanta Society, that during that period, whether it's for an hour or two, once or twice or thrice a week, during that period, if we then say, I'm going to make a very conscious effort, not only to look upon myself as the Atman or as a child of God, but look upon every person here as a child of God, as the Atman. And if everybody thinks that way, you will see it becomes so much more easier. No sooner you are sitting in the chapel, in the society, it becomes, okay, now I suddenly feel more closer to my ideal, because everybody is thinking in the same way. Now that strength that we acquire as a result of this will then linger with you even when you go out into the Kenmore Square, when nobody will be looking upon you as the Atman, but now you have a now little bit more strength to hold on to that ideal even if others are not. And that's how we have to progressively make ourselves stronger. That's true. Yeah.
Just a comment, you said that when we sleep, ego is not there, so we do not feel the pain. But it's a similar situation we have with even so far we are awake. If something happened to somebody and we don't know, and it doesn't affect. The moment we know that it's very loved one happens, something, the same situation, but it's changed.
Very true. That's very true. Very true. Yeah. It's like someone else's headache, it doesn't bother me as much as my own headache does, right? Yeah. You are right. That's perfectly right. Yeah. So we'll continue this discussion next time.
So this Sunday is the Mother's Day, so our topic will be Mother Knows Best. So all mothers and mothers' children are invited. On Saturday and Tuesday, our Arati and meditation will continue as usual, and next Wednesday we will meet and continue with the study of the Gita. So let's conclude with a prayer now. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the all-loving Being become manifest unto us. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May the Divine bless us all and fill our hearts with infinite grace and love. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.